report comes out, the next morning, instead of Molly showing up to work, she puts out an Instagram post. And in that Instagram post, you guys remember, one thing she didn't mention was anybody by name, including Stephen A. Smith. Now, I've left a show or two before, and trust me, you're going to name some names when you leave that. Just think about Shannon Sharp when he left Undisputed. Goodness, it took about 10 minutes of all the names he dropped. That's my point. Molly didn't do that. So that lets you know already there's some friction behind the scenes. Okay, so they're reporting that it's supposed to be the end of the year. Molly, by action, says it's right now. Instead of I'm leaving now, I'm leaving right now. She made it immediate. And then Stephen A. Smith makes the statement. Now, interesting once again, see, peep all these differences, right? These contradictions in terms of how they usually move and how they're moving with Molly. Max Kellerman left. Stephen A. Smith didn't even show up for the last day. Remember that? Interesting. And we all know that typically they don't talk about talent when they're gone. They just say, thank you for your services and we wish you well. This is a little different for many reasons. So when they're trying to paint it, it looks a lot different. Here we go. This is what's going on behind the scenes on the real. Molly was going through a contract negotiation, obviously, and that was not going well, obviously, because Molly wasn't getting what she wanted. What did Molly want? Molly wanted to do other things at the network, which included hosting her own show, kind of the Max Kellerman plan. I leave First Take, that's fine. Y'all got other shows out here, or we could create a show, whatever it may be. Let me land on my feet within the network, still be at the worldwide leader, and do my thing. Now, that wasn't happening. They weren't signing off on her not only hosting another show, but doing other shows within the network. So what happened was offers for her to stay there. Now, reportedly, she's making like around $500,000 a year. Now, contrast that to $20 million a year for Stephen A. Smith.
Welcome to First Take. Normally, our friend Molly Qerim would greet you. However, Molly announced last night she will be departing from ESPN. She's hosted First Take for 10 years and elevated the show with her grace, her expertise, an incomparable kindness. She's been an enormous part of our success for a decade. Not only did she keep me and many others in line, she did it with dignity and class and kindness, to say the least. We'll miss her and wish her every blessing on her future. I personally am grateful to her for her friendship, and I will miss spending every weekday morning with her right by my side.
The cameras had barely cooled from Friday's broadcast when the whispers began. Social media lit up, fans scrambling for answers. Molly Qerim, the steady anchor of First Take, the voice of calm in a storm of hot takes, was gone. No farewell tour, no countdown, no final debate. Just a short Instagram post, a wave goodbye, and silence. For nearly 2 decades, Molly Qerim carried the ESPN banner, hosting, reporting, and anchoring some of the network's most important shows. But when she walked out the door last weekend, it wasn't just a career move. It was a statement. Because behind the polished smiles and corporate press releases, the truth was messier. Molly Qerim didn't just leave ESPN, she fled it. When Molly joined ESPN in 2006, she was just another young talent grinding through highlights and updates. But in 2015, when Carrie Champion left First Take, Molly stepped in as interim host. What happened next was nothing short of history. She didn't scream like Skip Bayless. She didn't pound the table like Stephen A. Smith. Instead, she played referee, conductor, and storyteller all at once. With her timing, her wit, and her ability to keep egos in check, Molly turned chaos into theater. For 10 years, First Take became the most talked-about sports show in America, not just because of Stephen A.'s rants, but because Molly kept the whole circus from collapsing. She wasn't just a moderator, she was the glue. But while viewers saw laughs and chemistry on screen, behind the curtain the respect wasn't always there. For years, rumors floated about Molly being overshadowed, underappreciated, and sometimes outright dismissed during debates. Clips went viral of guests talking over her, of moments where she was sidelined in her own chair. She smiled through it, but insiders knew the mistreatment cut deep. And when her contract came up this summer, Molly wanted more than money. She wanted respect, a seat at the table, real creative input, recognition for carrying a show that made ESPN millions in ad dollars and streaming subscriptions. But instead of elevating her, the network tried to redefine her. Executives pitched her on doing other projects, spreading her across platforms. Translation: dilution, less spotlight, more filler. To Molly, it felt like a demotion wrapped in a smile. Burke Magnus, ESPN's president of content, would later call the talks amicable. He said they tried to find a role for her. He insisted there was no controversy. But in reality, Molly walked into the boardroom with 19 years of loyalty and a demand for dignity, and she walked out with nothing. "They wanted me to step down from First Take at year's end," one insider claimed she confided. "But why wait? If I'm not valued now, why keep pretending?" So instead of dragging it out, Molly did the unthinkable. She left immediately. Not in December, not after one last holiday broadcast, but in September, in the middle of the season, when the NFL storylines were just heating up. She cut the cord. No one looked more stunned than Stephen A. Smith. On his podcast days later, his voice cracked as he admitted, "To say that I'm quite sad about it is an understatement. Molly is my partner. She's my friend. This is uncomfortable." For once, the loudest man in sports television was subdued. He didn't have the details, he said. He didn't want to gossip. But the disappointment was written all over him. Because for 10 years, Stephen A. played the role of the star. But Molly was the one who made him look good. And now, the engine of First Take was gone. ESPN moved quickly to control the narrative. Magnus told reporters it was just business. He praised Molly as an unbelievable teammate. He insisted there was no shoe to drop. But that's exactly the problem. For years, networks like ESPN have downplayed how women in sports media are treated. Behind the glamour, there's a culture of minimization. When men shout, they're passionate. When women push back, they're difficult. When men demand better contracts, they're betting on themselves. When women do it, they're complicated negotiations. Molly's exit wasn't just about a contract. It was about drawing a line. She'd had enough of being the background, enough of being talked over, enough of being told to wait her turn. This wasn't business. This was personal. Now ESPN faces a gaping hole in its most successful daytime property. For the next 30 to 45 days, executives plan to rotate hosts, test options, and search for a replacement. But how do you replace someone who wasn't just a face, but a foundation? Kari Champion left before. Michelle Beadle came and went. But Molly Qerim was different. She wasn't just a host, she was an institution. Fans know it, viewers know it, and deep down, so does ESPN. The network may find another chair filler, but they won't find another Molly. So where does Molly go from here? Hollywood? A podcast empire? A streaming giant like Amazon or Netflix looking to break into sports talk? The options are endless, but what matters most is that Molly left on her terms. She didn't wait to be phased out. She didn't fade quietly. She made a choice, loud, bold, and unapologetic. She left the machine before the machine could chew her up, and that makes her one of the rarest things in modern media. A woman who walked away at the peak of her power, not the pit of it. In the days since her departure, fans have flooded social media with clips, tributes, and memories. Her funniest one-liners, her sharpest moments, her ability to cut through noise with just a smile or a perfectly timed glance. For a decade, she proved that sports talk doesn't need to be a screaming match to be compelling. That balance, composure, and intellect could stand tall in a room full of egos. Her exit leaves a shadow, but it also leaves a legacy, one that may inspire the next generation of women in sports media to demand more, expect more, and refuse to settle for less. As Burke Magnus said, it ended up being easier for her to make a clean break. Maybe so, but easy for ESPN doesn't mean easy for Molly. Walking away from nearly 20 years at the network she helped build was no small choice. It was a heartbreak, a betrayal, a declaration. And yet, when the dust settles, Molly Qerim may not be remembered for how she left First Take. She may be remembered for how she transformed it, and how, in the end, she refused to let anyone else control her story. Because sometimes the bravest move isn't staying in the chair, it's walking out of it.